Hello, everyone, and welcome to the online lecture Working in a Multicultural Environment, Tips for Effectively Managing a Multicultural Office. My name is Maria Dimitrovska from Development Solutions, and I'll be your lecturer for today. The online lecture you are attending is part of a series of webinars organized in the frame of the project Promoting Webinar-Based Youth Non-Formal Education in Southeast Europe. It is a project implemented by three organizations: Development Solutions from Macedonia, Institute of Entrepreneurship Development from Greece, and Foundation 42 from Bulgaria. The project is supported by the Erasmus Plus program of the European Union. Prior to the start of the webinar, I'm going to note some general rules regarding our participation in the webinar session. As it was indicated in the invitation email you received, the necessary equipment for participation is to have a computer or a smartphone or any type of smart device with an internet connection. You will also need a camera, microphone, and headphones. We're going to do a small test of the audio and video connection a little bit later, so I would like to invite all participants that have camera on hand to turn on the camera so that we can see each other during the webinar session. Some of you have noticed that upon your registration and entering the webinar session, your microphone has been automatically muted. This is for practical reasons, because during the webinar sessions, some microphones may be turned on, not deliberately, but they can create a situation where we hear background noises or background conversations, which can disturb the webinar session. So all microphones will be muted throughout the webinar session, but if you want to join the conversation, you can raise a hand, or you can use the raise the hand tool, which is on the right side of your screens, or you can send a message using the chat tool. Some of you have already tried the chat tool. The chat tool is an option that has also public and private conversations. So you can use the public feature in cases when you have a message or question that concerns everyone in the group, or you can privately chat with other participants. Of course, you can use the chat tool to notify us for any technical problems that may occur during the webinar session. You're invited to post questions or give comments anytime during the webinar session, but bear in mind that there will be a specific question and answer session or session for discussion at the end of the presentation. The presentation is going to last for about 45 minutes, and then we will have a short session for questions and see the topics we're going to cover today. First, what is working in a multicultural environment? Then the advantages of working in a multicultural setting. What are the main challenges? Because it is not only advantages, there also are challenges, and how to manage it effectively, how to excel in working in a multicultural environment. Prior to the start of the presentation, we're going to do a short survey. The first part of the survey is related to your experiences with webinars. I'm interested to know whether you have participated in a webinar before, and the next set of questions is going to be related to your experiences in living and working in a multicultural environment. So on your screens, a little box will appear with 3 questions. Select the answer that is most suitable to your experience. Bear in mind that I do not get individual responses from the participants, so everything I can see on my screen from your responses are group answers. So we're going to see how many of you have webinar experiences. Of course, experiences related to living and working in a multicultural environment. I'm going to end the polling in a while, so the ones of you that have not provided answers, please do. Okay, we're going to close the polling session and share the results. So I'm very glad to see that a lot of you have previously attended the webinar. Of course, cultural diversity is all around, so all respondents responded that they live and they have worked and or studied in a multicultural setting. This is excellent because it shows that the topic is relevant to what our realities are. So we're surrounded by cultural differences, not only when we go to visit other countries, but all around us in our everyday lives, in our work settings. Cultural differences refer to any type of diversity in terms of the ethnicity, gender, religion, social belonging. Usually we have a pretty stereotypical vision of what cultural diversity is, but in fact, our surroundings are very culturally diverse without us sometimes being aware of it. Uh, when we speak about workplace, the multicultural environment in the workplace refers to workers working together but belonging to a variety of cultural backgrounds. So, multicultural setting, multicultural management of multiculturalism. What is multiculturalism? Multiculturalism comes natural to us when we speak about a group of people, of individuals which represent a number of cultural backgrounds, and of course have different attitudes, viewpoints, and behaviors that derive from these different cultural backgrounds. Multiculturalism, to this end, refers to both coexistence but also interaction. This means that we, yes, live and work alongside each other, but we also communicate and share and exchange experiences with each other, which manifests as dialogue, harmony, and integration. So, knowledge of being firstly aware and then knowledgeable of cultural differences may help workers operating in multicultural environment to reduce possible misunderstandings that may arise from the different cultural backgrounds and to enable them to foresee the possible reaction of their peers at work. For this end, this does not come always naturally and often requires specific efforts to be achieved, like more flexibility or preparedness for adaptation, or understanding and respect for different cultures and values. Uh, these values will also include tolerance and open-mindedness to differences, friendly communication, and of course, good non-verbal communication skills. There are several advantages of working in a multicultural environment. First, it provides us with an opportunity to gain greater understanding, but to also develop respect for cultural differences. Why and how this happens? First, we're being exposed to new ideas, new perspectives. Cultural backgrounds does not, different cultural backgrounds does not mean that we celebrate our holidays differently. Also, it is tied to a different set of worldviews, which do not have to be conflicting. They can also coincide, they can also be complementary. So we can learn a lot from the worldviews presented by other cultures. In this way, working in a multicultural environment can teach us to be more open-minded, to be more flexible and more tolerant. Seeing the world through other people's eyes can help us gain new perspectives on our living problems, but also on different problems we're dealing with at work. So we can learn about different cultures and ways of life, which are characteristic for different countries. And we can understand better the complexity of the world we're living in. Another advantage of working in a multicultural environment is related to increased creativity. It is also related to what we spoke about earlier, that we are presented with different perspectives on the world and of the problems we're dealing with, and that these different perspectives on our problems can contribute to development of new, innovative, and creative decisions and solutions. So members from multiple backgrounds can work more creatively and more innovatively to solve problems. And finding different ways to express ourselves, using different languages to express what we're working on, different gestures, and teaching each other this cultural diversity can help us be more creative. These new ideas and perspectives can help us uh, face more effectively new questions and new challenges that may occur in the workplace. Another advantage of working in a multicultural environment is to be better prepared to align with an increasingly global workforce. For our generations, much more than the generations of our parents, it is expected to be more prepared to communicate, engage, interact, and cooperate with people from different countries. They do not always have to be our team members in the same company, but there is a possibility that we were going to communicate with people from different countries more frequently, that we are going to um, have to cooperate on different work arrangements or problems. So learning cultural competences or multicultural competences can help us communicate more effectively globally. Of course, this is a process of continuous learning and requires a degree of awareness of other cultural groups and how we can bring groups together. Another advantage of working in a multicultural environment is also to strengthen our existing skills or skills we would like to develop in the future. For example, to learn or to strengthen another foreign language. The best way to learn a language is to actually practice it. So if we have an opportunity to practice the language with a colleague that belongs to the language group we are interested in, then it can help us improve our proficiency in the language more quickly. Of course, advantages of working in a multicultural environment also refer to the potential for providing better service for customers and partners. Working in a multicultural setting is important, but also it is very important when we have clients or beneficiaries coming from different cultural backgrounds to be able to provide them services and support and to cooperate with them in a way that is close to their culture is very important to the overall effectiveness of our company. Of course, working in a multicultural environment is not all advantages, it's not all great, and it's not all smooth. There are certain challenges that we need to be aware of when working in a multicultural environment. The first is related to the mere fact that we have people with cultural differences. These cultural differences can occur even between people from the same culture but belonging to a different region, or different religion, or different gender, or even we can have a generational gap and misunderstandings from belonging to different generational groups. So multicultural organizations need to focus on first developing awareness of the all different types of cultural diversity that exist in their companies, and of course to try to establish a climate of cooperation between the different cultural groups. One common mistake is assuming that national cultural norms are the same as organizational norms. We can have different organizational norms, and having the stereotypical view on other workers or workers belonging to a different culture can have a detrimental actually effect on our efforts to cooperate and to engage multiculturally with everyone. Of course, we have to be very much aware of the different expectations in life, but also in the workplace. So sometimes we just assume what the person from the other culture will understand from what we're speaking about. To diminish this possibility, it is always best to check whether we understand the expectations of the person we are talking to. Not just the expectations about our roles and their roles, but also their understanding of the purpose of the different tasks and activities. Make sure that you set enough time for all the necessary clarifications when working with co-workers that belong to especially a very different cultural background. Of course, we have to also be aware of different channels and contexts of communication. The different cultural backgrounds can also refer to different modes of communication, different preferences for communication, different hierarchical roles. So when this is especially important when we want to join a new organization or team that is composed of people that are from a culture that is different from ours, but also when we're working in new and unfamiliar international contexts. Many large companies provide different trainings for multicultural competences for their employees, especially when they have frequent engagements with their clients that belong to a very different culture from theirs. Another challenge that is related to working in a multicultural environment is, of course, the cultural differences and the existence of cultural bias or ethnocentrism among coworkers. This is a very difficult challenge to overcome when you have such a problem in the workplace. Such a problem can hinder the overall performance of the team. And in this situation, you need to carefully manage the relations between the workers. Sometimes this cultural bias or ethnocentrism is done unconsciously by some workers. Sometimes it is conscious and deliberate and needs to be managed as quickly as possible. In some cases, when people are aware of what they're doing and they're doing it deliberately, it may require some change of team members and separating persons from different cultures that perceive cultural otherness as hostile. Another challenge related to working in a multicultural environment is the process of integration. So this is related to the existing cultural bias and ethnocentrism we spoke of earlier. Integration across multicultural teams can be really difficult in the face of existing prejudice or negative cultural stereotypes. This can create a poor working climate in a team, can make people less inclined to work together, since these negative cultural stereotypes can be really detrimental. Not being able to develop strategies for overcoming them means that the team could possibly break down due to existing negative cultural stereotypes. Of course, another challenge is related to communication, since different communication and working styles may exist, especially different communication styles that are related to people that have recently come in the organization and are not very well acquainted to the organizational culture. Secondly, this is also important really, for people that are not speaking fluently the official language of the organization. So this may be their second or third language, and they're not very proficient in using it. Being very aware of the communication problems and misunderstandings can help alleviate some of the problems that may arise in the process of communication. Of course, the mode of learning is also present. Since culture affects the way people learn, we can have different patterns of learning. Um, the different this is also effective of the overall learning experience. Make sure that whenever you have some sort of training or process of strengthening capacities of the members of your team, that you take in regard different patterns of learning of your employees belonging to different cultures. How to manage a multicultural team? First, development of multiculturalism is in a company is a very long-term process. This requires first a competent staff, which is working competent management structure, which is working on increasing staff knowledge, attitudes, communication skills for all the processes of work. How to create a better climate for a multicultural team. First, the first step is, of course, to enhance cultural exposure. Cultural exposure can impact the development of cultural understanding. We're just exposed to difference, and we're trying to rationalize that difference, and we're trying to understand where that person is coming from. So, increasing the possibilities for people to be surrounded by otherness can be the first step in creating a better climate for a functional multicultural team. Of course, another important step is to engage specific efforts to promote a climate of cooperation through group work, through team building activities, to creation of a shared culture of the group that all the members of the group can identify with. Effective management of multicultural team requires multicultural competences. Multicultural competence refers to the abilities and skills needed when people from different cultures are in interaction with each other. So multicultural competence is based on a variety of characteristics such as flexibility, patience, positivity, openness, interest, curiosity, empathy, fairness. All these characteristics do not always come natural and spontaneous. So it is multicultural competence is not automatic and not innate. Being multiculturally competent is actually a lot more than just being polite to your coworker or empathetic to people from other cultures. It is actually knowing about the otherness, embracing the otherness, and using this otherness to get things done through people by capitalizing on their cultural diversity. So I would like to ask you another question related to what we spoke of earlier, related to multicultural competence. You're going to see another box on your screen, and I'm waiting for your answers. What do you think? Multicultural competence is something people are born with, or something we develop throughout our lives? We are going to wait for a few more answers from the participants. And now we're going to end the poll and share the results. So one of the things that multicultural competence is something we are born with, but the vast majority disagrees and thinks that it is something we develop throughout our lives. Multicultural competence is not something we're born with, but yes, people exposed to cultural diversity from an early age may think that they have been born with multicultural competency. But of course, multicultural competency is something that we can work on and improve and strengthen throughout our lives, no matter how old we are and no matter in what setting we're working in. So multicultural competence is related mainly, whether we will develop our multicultural competence is related to the extent of our exposure to different cultures and our motivation to work with representatives of different cultures on joint tasks. So we will now stop sharing the results and continue with the presentation. Multicultural competence is actually related to the core concept, which is cultural competency. Multicultural competency is actually the ability to understand a culture well enough to be able to communicate and work with people from that culture. We are all very well culturally competent in our own culture. We know the language, the customs, the values, the traditions, but knowing more about other cultures is the first step to gaining a better understanding on how to work with other cultures. So this process of learning to be empathetic and sensitive to the cultural expressions of another group, it is not as much as difficult process, but it is a process that requires both time and both energy and the effort to do it. So this can be done by observing persons from other cultures, empathizing, appreciating, learning to appreciate other people's ways of doing things, learning to value different perspectives on the same issues or problems, learning to value other people's other forms of contribution to the solution to the problem. Cultural competence is very tightly related to the concept of cultural awareness. To develop cultural competences, we first need to be culturally aware. To develop cultural awareness of the existence of cultural otherness, cultural diversity. So cultural awareness refers to the consciousness of a person's own cultural background and the cultural background of others, the values and norms held, as well as the ways of thinking, behavior models which direct the cultural action. The most difficult dimension to change are actually the attitudes. The attitudes can affect all other dimensions of intercultural cooperation, and they're a precondition to an operation promoting equality and fairness. If there are attitudes that inhibit such cooperation, it is quite difficult to change them among people. Attitudes, prejudices, and stereotypes from an early childhood, whether we are conscious of them or not, can be difficult to change. When managing a multicultural team, the first step is to identify whether there exist some cultural gaps. Managing a multicultural team does not mean that we will always deal with radically diverse cultures. These can be very similar cultures, but however, have certain aspects that are different, that are distant from each other. Certain cultural gaps may exist between the members of the team. So we should first try to understand whether there are certain cultural gaps in our team, in our workplace. These cultural gaps can refer to different ways of doing things. For example, in some cultures, it isn't advisable to shake hands with members of the opposite sex or to show certain gestures which are considered offensive, or different perspectives of the time and the dynamics of the work. So a good leader or a good team manager should learn to respect the local culture, but also be aware of the other cultural gaps that may exist across the team. The language barriers were already mentioned, but now we're mentioning them in a context that should provide us with support in managing language barriers. So we can have certain non-native speakers that may find it difficult to communicate effectively. They are not sufficiently proficient in the language, or they're just hesitant to use this language. So the manager or the leader of this group should be a patient listener, a speaker who ensures clarity and understanding. Remember what we said earlier. Ask a lot of questions. Do not presuppose that your co-workers from another culture have understood what you're saying in the way you understand it. Ask more questions to make sure that you're on the same level regarding and on the same line regarding the issues you're discussing about. Of course, in order to alleviate or bridge the language barriers, you can always foster multiple methods of inquiry. So this refers to the ability to inquire about the same point, but using a wide variety of questions. So you're discussing the same thing, but you're discussing it with different questions that relate to different aspects of the issue in order to be sure that you're on the same page with your colleagues. Of course, it is also good to find individuals who can provide you with a different perspective or interpretation of specific culturally diverse perspectives or behaviors that you can come across in the working environment. Stereotypes are also another important aspect that should be managed when we're dealing in a multicultural office. So stereotypes in and of themselves do not automatically lead to miscommunication or communication breakdown, but of course, inaccurate or negative stereotypes that are rigidly held and that you as a leader have adopted can lead to inaccurate predictions, to misunderstandings in communication, to creation of larger cultural gaps that you would need more efforts to alleviate. Of course, we also have certain positive stereotypes that can be a source of miscommunication or misunderstanding. For example, we presume that certain cultures have greater work ethic, or that certain cultures are more lazy, or that certain cultures have distinct view on how holidays are celebrated, or any type of example. Stereotypes are not as bad in themselves, but if you rely too much on stereotypes, especially negative stereotypes, without making the effort to communicate everything you want to the other side, it can lead to breakdown in communication and misunderstandings. In order to manage a multicultural team, of course, it is crucial to create and ensure a positive climate for diversity at the workplace. So you can have, first of all, written principles to make the objectives of the workplace and the way people from different cultures are going to conduct with each other accessible to all employees. And this provides also the whole initiative for creating a multicultural office, a binding character. So these diversity principles can refer to general values, but also to concrete rules of behavior and statutory provisions, for example, to prohibit mean jokes or insults among the colleagues, or to always have certain rules of conduct when we have cultural misunderstandings. So these written principles could also be accessible to everyone, to be communicated to everyone actively. These diversity principles can also, it is also positive to be included in the organization's internal and external promotion materials, of course, homepage as well. How to develop these diversity principles? Well, we can follow several guidelines. For example, why do we intend to integrate cultural diversity in our organizational culture? Why do we want this type of diversity? What are the most important aspects of cultural diversity that we have? What should an appreciation of diversity entail? And how can we combine the appreciation of diversity on one hand with the existing principles of our organization on the other? Of course, the second step, apart from creating a climate for an intercultural understanding, is to create situations where these multicultural competences are strengthened, acquired, and enhanced. So you can use different interactive methods to do this, bringing people from culturally diverse backgrounds together. For example, through team building games, role playing games, um, specific games that enhance intercultural competences, games for introduction and cooperation. These do not have to be specific seminars that are going to be organized somewhere abroad that everyone can attend, but you can have small team building activities every week, for example, for your employees. The goal of these exercises is first to increase the number and quality of interaction among workers from different cultural backgrounds, and as a second, to increase tolerance, to increase sensitivity for different cultures and competences that are related to intercultural communication. Leadership that is aware of the cultural diversity existence, but also of the cultural diversity policies in the organization is also important. Such leadership should be able to recognize different cultural influences and how to deal with cultural influences from people from different cultural backgrounds. Of course, there's a common mistake that people use common generalizations to and apply them in the everyday work. Stereotypes, as we mentioned, are not always as bad, but these can be useful only to get some sort of vague idea of what a person might be like. But the rest of the communication and the cooperation needs to be founded on continuous interaction between the manager and the worker with the other co-workers. There is always, of course, the risk of imposing our own set of values on others, thinking that this can be done often subconsciously, thinking that our way of doing things is culturally neutral and that our way of doing things is the best way of doing things. This is the easiest way to lose respect when you work in a multicultural environment, because we're aware that the values that we grew up with, that we have an intrinsic need to defend them. But working in a multicultural environment requires a dosage of flexibility and open-mindedness when we're dealing with different perspectives. You have to be aware that the different values of other cultures are a derivative of different perspectives of seeing the world and engaging with the world. So being aware of this condition, of this state, can help us start being more flexible about how we can operate our organization. Of course, communication is also crucial in the process of managing a multicultural team. This means that we can provide information accurately, promptly, but also to establish communication practices that foster mutual understanding between the management and the employees themselves. We have to be aware of different communication gaps and communication misunderstandings that are rooted in culture. This is very important when a project, for example, is troubled and needs immediate corrective action. For example, we have people from different cultures that can act differently to bad news. Some can act completely reserved, but otherwise be completely troubled with the fact that the project is not heading the right way. Others can exaggerate the news, or certain people can simply respond differently to different types of organizational settings. And first being aware of that and then knowing how to manage this is crucial in running an effective multicultural team. Team building is a much needed activity when we are dealing with multicultural teams. This way, we can not only bring closer together people from different cultures, but we can also foster learning about other cultures, creating a better understanding of what other cultures are and what our um, colleagues from other cultures can behave in an organization. So, but team building activities can also become an issue when people are comprised from a mix of from different cultural backgrounds. So every team building activity needs to incorporate cross-cultural perspective in order for the whole team to benefit from the potential advantages of cultural diversity in the workplace. This means that there is specific type of cultural diversity training that might be of benefit to multicultural teams. This cultural diversity training involves understanding uh, what cultural diversity is, why cultural diversity is important, how can we understand other cultures at all levels. So using this type of training specifically can help in creating better understanding and closer relationships between members of the team. When managing a multicultural team, of course, the different perceptions of time that are culturally rooted are also important. Different cultures can have different views on time. Of course, they can also have different views on the balance between work and family, and what is very important, different views on what means to be late. Uh, I cannot remember any time that we have started a webinar precisely at the time it was scheduled. We're always running around 5 minutes late. This is because the people we're interacting belong to cultures that have very flexible view of what is being late. Usually people come to the last minute and attend the webinar session, or they always come late to the webinar session. So being working with people that have different perspectives of time, different perspectives on punctuality is also it is important to develop an awareness of such differences and to manage them effectively. Of course, praising cultural differences in the workplace is also important. And when you're in a position when you can schedule meetings, events, work days, you can also maintain a cultural calendar so you can be aware of the different holidays for different cultures. You can respect the cultural diversity by perhaps creating small celebrations of the holidays of the cultures of the different members of the team. And this can be promoted as a way of bridging cultural differences and creating a sense of community in the workplace. Working in a culturally diverse environment does not only mean we have to manage cultural differences to create a unified organizational culture, but it also means that we can learn the cultural differences of our workers and effectively use them in the working process. So if we don't plan and deal with diversity effectively, problems may arise. The aim of all these activities is actually developing a feeling of belonging within the organization. So we have people from different cultural backgrounds, we have people that perceive and act differently on the workplace, but by creating possibilities for knowing each other, engaging with each other, and working with each other, we need to create a joint culture which is shared by all workers and that all workers can identify with. So this can also be done by encouraging employees, even the ones that are hesitant to work in multicultural environments, to work in diverse groups. They can see that they can get to know other people, they can value other people and their cultures on an individual basis. And this can help break down some preconceived notions, cultural misunderstandings, stereotypes. So I would like to thank you for the attention. And now we're going to move to the question and answer section, or the discussion section. Prior to starting the discussion, I would like to mention that if you are interested in webinars as a form of learning, you can get new information about upcoming webinars organized by us or our project partners, or by third parties like universities and private schools. This information is posted on our website, www.prowebc.org. You can also follow us on social media, on our Facebook page, where we also provide information about new and upcoming webinars. But also, if you want to check the other webinars we have organized so far, you can check our YouTube channel, ProWebC Project, where you can see recordings from previous webinars. And I would like to do another poll before we end the presentation session. About this question is related to your experiences with webinars and with the current topic.